Every club.
Every day.
The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Daily Palace podcast, brought to you by the Global Sports Podcast Network. Here we, of course, discuss everything Crystal Palace. It is time to look forward to another weekend of Premier League action. I'm sure a lot of Palace fans hoping that at the end of this weekend, we will be talking about another victory for Palace. There haven't been many, to talk about this season. Brighton, it is that the Eagles will be facing this weekend, and just fingers crossed as to what the result will be. Wale Bakar is my name, and I'm glad to be back on the pod tonight. Joe Lodge joins me tonight. Joe, great to see you. How you doing, Paul?
Very well, thanks, mate. Great to have you back. And as you say, I'm looking forward to my first derby as a plastic Crystal Palace supporter. So maybe we'll get some plastic knuckle dusters and have a fight with a plastic doll sometime on the weekend.
Well, you mentioned that it's a derby, and it's always a good one to get a result. In a derby, and I'm sure the game against Brighton will hold maybe a lot more significant, or at least a little bit more significant for some of the Palace players that understand, the bragging rights involved, and of course, particularly with our results have been so far this season, this could be a result that could maybe lift the squad and lift the atmosphere, at Palace. But the game, of course, is at the Amex this weekend. Brighton, they've had sort of the season that you expect. They've been great. They've lost games that you expect them to win. They've dropped points when you expect them to. But I'm sure Palace would do anything to have the season Brighton is having at the moment instead of what we've got. When you look at the game on the surface, Joe, what do you expect in the Brighton Palace game this weekend?
Well, I think one of the main points with Brighton is, and I think Glasner was sort of driving this home earlier in his press conference, it's very difficult to know what to expect from them. They've got a big squad full of players with diverse skill sets, with sort of similar probably levels of ability, a manager who's flexible. I mean, I don't fully know what he's intending to do yet and stuff. So they are a little bit hard to pin down, and how each team is going to play and how they bounce off each other is a bit hard to pin down as a consequence of that. One thing, obviously, the story of Palace this season has kind of been not conceding that many goals, but really not scoring that many either. Whereas the story of Brighton's season has been scoring about 2 and conceding not far off 2 a game as well. So if the game's more Palacey, it might end up quite low scoring, underwhelming. If it's more Brighton, it might be a laugh. I'm hoping it will be a laugh. I think they're both teams suffer from a bit of an inability to slow the ball down, control it in the midfield and stuff like that. That's definitely something that just left Brighton's game as soon as De Zerbi went. So I think it could be quite exciting. Slugfest. I mean, both teams are in a run where they can afford to risk a loss for the morale boost of a win. So I'm hoping it'll be exciting. I think it could be good.
Well, and you make a very interesting point when you talk about how unpredictable Brighton are. I was talking with a friend of mine the last time, and they had a player on the pitch, and it's not very often that you get a team in the Premier League bring on a player or start a player where you're thinking, oh, who's that? How many games has he played? They just seem to have. Sometimes I wonder whether the 20-something players in their squad, they just seem to have all those players. And for some reason, because of the kind of system that they run, the kind of work that they put in, everyone's always, referring to the Brighton model. They seem to have players who can slot in and still give the same level of performance, that the player that they're replacing would give on any given day, and that works for them. You talk about the goal scoring and concession starts for both sides. For Palace, there's been 14 goals scored and 20 conceded. That pretty much tells us why there's been a lot of draws and victories been had to come by for Palace. For Brighton, they've had 25 goals and 22 conceded. And they, at the moment, are 11 points above Crystal Palace this season. But when we talk about, Brighton's ability to, call up many players and bring in a lot of players into their lineup, it's not the same for Palace at the moment. A number of injuries, to contend with. Adam Wharton, from what Glasner said, will not be, featuring in the game. There's a couple of other players seem like they will not be available. Joe Ward, another player who is unlikely to feature in the game. Matthias Franca, Glasner confirmed, is still in rehabilitation, and there's some other names. But when you look at the Palace squad at the moment and on what Brighton have got. Well, it's somewhat of a cliche to ask. Are you any hopeful of a good result this weekend?
I am actually. I think, as you say, it plays into Brighton's favour that they know exactly how Crystal Palace are going to play. They don't have a luxury of rotation, or I would suggest probably, from what we know of Glasner, what we've seen of him, not really the inclination to rotate as well. I think he prefers stability and consistency. And I think Palace are reaping the rewards of that in their improved defensive performances recently. That kind of gets me on to why I'm hopeful is Brighton just cannot control the game and defensively are suspect. So I think they're going to be a handful for Palace. For Palace's back three, it will be a real big test for them. But this is a Palace defense that's recently limited Newcastle to no shots, kind of it's limited City to kind of 3 good chances, albeit not the best City side right now. You might suggest with City's current crisis, actually this Brighton team's a bigger test still for them. But I think there's reason to be optimistic they can stand up to that challenge. And then what you saw, particularly in that chaotic last 4 minutes against Leicester for Brighton, is there are gaps in their back four. They've not. So I think their defensive stats are not horrific, Brighton's, but they're not good. And also they kept 2 clean sheets in their first 4 games. And since then, I think they've only kept 1, and they've only been able to play the same back four something like twice in a row. They've been really unsettled because of defensive injuries, and they've not quite found the chemistry. And look at that Jamie Vardy goal in particular at the weekend when they drew 2-2, Leicester conceding twice in the last 4 minutes, whatever it was. They're kind of inexplicable spaces for a Premier League defence to be leaving open. They also have a really high line with not massively fast defenders. So if Ismaila Sarr gets the nod, as I expect he will and think he should, a player like him will really fancy that. I think there's great opportunities for him to exploit. I think there are reasons to be optimistic for Palace. Brighton are a little bit out of sorts at the moment, and they do have vulnerabilities. The flip side is, as we say, they have got a lot of attacking quality. They're unpredictable. They rotate around a lot, so they're really hard to pick up. So I think there'll be goals in the game. Quite in what distribution, who knows? But I don't think Palace should be looking at it as a write-off, and they should go in more confident than they did, say, a year ago to a Brighton game, definitely.
Well, Brighton's last game, as Joe mentioned, was against Leicester. They were 2-0 up, lost the 2-goal lead towards the end of the game. Incidentally, Leicester were 2-0 up against Palace, lost a 2-0 lead, and Palace got a draw. I don't know whether that suggests anything, but we'll see how it goes. Sunday kickoff time. We'll see how it goes. Remember, we're live across all social media platforms at GSPN Palace, of course, at GSPN Official. That's where you link up with the brother network, and we'll be glad to hear from you. We are powered by Zencastr, of course, and we'll take a break to get some words from Zencastr. And when we return, we will talk more about some of the things that Olivier Glasner mentioned in his pre-match press conference, talking about his evaluation of his Palace team. Don't go anywhere.
Here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we've spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform, and let me tell you, Zencastr came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, then check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr.
All right, many thanks for staying with us. It's Wale and Joe here on the Daily Palace podcast, brought to you by the Global Sports Podcast Network. And we're looking ahead of this weekend's clash between Crystal Palace and Brighton at the Amex. And we will get on to talk about some of the things Olivier Glasner said during his press conference. Joe, I first of all, want to talk about, we did mention Palace's not so great goal scoring record this season, 14 goals scored this season. Glasner was talking about the need to, needless to say, that Palace needed to score more goals. But mentioned decision making in the final third, applying the finishing touch, and that is something that a lot of people would agree with, and has been missing for Palace. But we were more hopeful at the start of the season as regards Palace's offensive expectations. Mateta had a fantastic season. Had a great Olympics. Looked like it was going to get into the season hot and blazing. Then came the lad from Arsenal who joined as well, Eddie Nketiah, Ismaila Sarr joining. Although Edouard did leave on loan, and Ayew left for Leicester, but we were very hopeful as regards what to expect from Palace attacking wise. But 14 goals this season isn't a great output so far, you think?
I mean, it's not a great output. I think there are a few reasons for it. One is just collectively across the team, poor finishing. I mean, Palace have massively underperformed their expected goals. The upside lies maybe the teams in the lower part of the table always underperform a little bit, but this Palace team has got plenty of good finishes, and we've spoken before about how Jean-Philippe Mateta has actually got one of the highest shot conversion rates in league history. So it's, I think, basically something that will level out if they continue creating chances on that front. It's not something to sort of overly panic about. I guess the other thing is, which we're seeing start to remedy now, was a little bit of either a lack of chemistry or a lack of clear understanding of how to create chances in the post Elise Eze Mateta era. Just losing that one vital piece in Elise has made Palace much less dynamic. Those kind of attacks, like we're talking about, the sort of attacks Brighton can execute, where they all kind of rotate, swap positions, interchange fluidly. They don't really seem to be on the table right now for Palace. They can't quite find the rhythm with that. And I think the front three, whoever it may have been in each game, were sort of trying to play in that way and not succeeding. Now a bit more reactive, a bit more counter-attacking, making use of the pace of Sarr has really revolutionised things in the last few weeks. And also, I think part of it was just, you say, players being tired after the summer, really. And you see a few players are looking like they're starting to get back to their old selves. Munoz, 2 goals in 2 games, has been brilliant in recent weeks. And Mateta's another who's been a bit up and down, but in the first part of the season, you saw he just wasn't affecting games at all. And I think it was basically tiredness. It wasn't like he was even missing that many chances. He just wasn't getting into positions. Now we're seeing him look a lot more lively, threw himself about all over the place against City, even if he wasn't the man who ultimately had the telling contributions. And that goal against Ipswich was superb, as he said himself, magnifique. And so I think a lot of the issues are being remedied, but also I think it's worth bearing in mind Palace actually were creating plenty of chances and just not finishing them in the early part of the season. But it came with really high pressing that made them massively vulnerable on the counter when they got played through. Probably in recent weeks, some of that chance creation, that chance volume has gone down a bit, but that's a reflection of a team taking less risks, being a bit more robust, being solid, and when they have had the chance to move the ball into dangerous positions, they've done so quite quickly. They've picked their head up, found those runs, as was epitomised by that curling Hughes ball into Daniel Munoz against City the other day. And so I think the issues are starting to be resolved, but it might be that the good Palace we're seeing now, iteration 2 of good Palace under Glasner, is just a lower scoring one, a slightly more conservative, slightly more reactive one, and that's fine if they're keeping out. If they're conceding less than they're scoring, fine. That's not an issue.
Yeah, but Glasner, because talking about efficiency in front of goal, I was checking 35 big chances created by Palace. Not the worst, considering Liverpool with the highest have got 57. But then what is more worrying is 25 of those chances have been missed, actually. So what it means is, so it tells you, when Glasner talks about efficiency in front of goal, and maybe gives you an idea of what has led to the poor situation for Palace. But Glasner also talks about stability of the side, saying the team's more stable than what it was at the start of the season. That of course is a very subjective statement, and when you look at recent results, draws against City. The win the other day was a bit at fault. Wasn't entirely a very convincing win, so to say. I'm sure that a couple of people will look at it and say, yes, there's been a few good results, but there's also been a spell earlier in the season after the first 2-3 games thereabout where there was 2-3 good results that came back to back, and then there was that patch in form again. Would you agree when Glasner talks about the team stability being better? You of course mentioned, being more reactive, trying to close up shop, reducing goals being conceded. But when you look at what we've seen in the last couple of games, would you agree with the, a better stability verdict by Olivier Glasner?
I think so. I think I would. They don't necessarily read like the results of a stable team. Any 2-2 sounds kind of chaotic, but actually, I think that's not really reflective of the score of the play in that sense. That just came up against a City side who have really clinical finishers, took their chances. They've conceded very few big opportunities in the past few weeks, and crucially, have just those little baffling errors that we'd see at the start of last season where one or two players are just completely insanely out of position, or someone passed the ball into midfield area where no one is. They seem to have been cut out And quite what that is, whether it's a move to, again, a slightly more conservative style, maybe pulls people about a bit less, takes a bit less risks. I kind of a few fewer risks, but I sort of think, like, I don't know, it might just be there was quite a lot of squad overhaul, and they've played together enough now. And Glasner, while we're all kind of saying maybe you should change the shape, maybe you should let's try the other, sort of persevered with plan A, and they kind of look like they've just, it's clicked for them mentally where they're actually supposed to be at any one point in time, where their teammates are going to be. I think that leads to a lot less wastage of the ball, and it means there aren't the same number of gaps defensively for other teams to exploit on the counter, or just running straight at Palace and running through baffling gaps in the back three at times as they have been at the start of the season. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the key to Palace's turnaround. Basically, long story short, is it's not really an uptick in the attacking performance. It is the defense solidifying, the midfield solidifying, and the team making less mistakes. Really, I think that's been the key turnaround in the last 4 games or so.
Anyway, well, we will see what will happen this game. What we have is Palace side that are looking to reduce the number of goals that they concede, and a Brighton side that on their day can score as much as they want, and maybe the Brighton with what comes with the game and the style of Fabian New Zealand's side will be the good test for Olivier Glasner's more and more stable Crystal Palace side. Well, we'll take another pause, and when we return, we will, just talk more about the game against Brighton. We'll get Joe's prediction, and of course, there's a wild card. Just the one quiz question for Joe. We'll see how well he does. We'll be back in a bit. Please don't go anywhere. All right.
This podcast is part of the Global Sports Podcast Network, the only network bringing you exclusive daily news and views on your Premier League team, the Premier League, women's football and fantasy football. A unique listening experience that puts fans first, bringing you the very latest breaking news from your team. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and make us your first listen every day. Global Sports Podcast Network, every club, every day.
All right, thank you for staying with us. It's the Daily Palace podcast brought to you by the Global Sports Podcast Network. And just as we wrap things up tonight, let's get into, talk about some of the guys that could cause Palace damage in the game against Brighton on Sunday. Because Brighton's biggest stars, well known to a lot of Premier League teams, the likes of Mitoma, Simon Adingra, Danny Welbeck, who has had a good season so far as well. But when you look at that Brighton side and the kind of games that Palace, or kind of players that Palace have struggled to handle this season, who are the players that you think will cause the biggest problems for Palace?
Well, as we say, I kind of anticipate I'm going to have egg on my face. I'm going to highlight a lot of players that then in the mad cap, Fabian Hertzler, Brighton rotation roundabout are just not going to end up playing in the game at all. But I think Brighton fans are expecting Danny Welbeck to start this one. He's a good one to highlight because at 34, he seems to have suddenly added goals to his game, which was a thing that was missing. He scored like 6 so far this season, which is roughly a goal every other start for him. Him adding goals to his game at 34 is reminding me of that my granddad had his first curry at 84. And I was like, it's just something you need to add to your repertoire now? I expect it. But he's genuinely, regardless of the goals, he's a problem. He always has been brilliant at making sacrificial runs, causing chaos, creating space for other people in that way. Kind of tireless and very intelligent at that part of the game. And so that's something that Palace have to think hard about how they deal with when they sort of treat his run as a decoy and let him go off into space, and when they actually need to go with him. Because there are players, lots of players in that Brighton team, be it, I don't know, it ended up being Minter, Adingra, João Pedro, anyone like that who could come and exploit it. Another player I'd probably expect to start, as he has started more often than not this season, is Mitoma on the wing. I think he's an interesting one. He probably causes Palace a problem whether they succeed in keeping him quiet or not. I think we'll probably guess that Palace will be playing Chalobah in that right central defence role, and he's the one I trust the least in a one-on-one defensive situation. I would say, not that I don't trust him, but I think he's not got that kind of sure-footedness and that elegance of Gay and the quality. Trust him to sort of go with the attack wherever they go. And obviously, Matoma's famously got his dissertation in dribbling, so I think his little burst of pace and change direction could cause a problem if he's isolated. If he's not isolated with him, that'll be reflective of Munoz being pegged back to double up on him. And Munoz has been such an important attacking outlet for Palace in recent weeks that they'd lose a lot of their edge on the attack if Munoz is dragged back constantly to cope with Mitoma. So I think he will probably be a problem for Palace, even if he's quiet, if you see what I mean. But yeah, otherwise, I mean, as you say with Brighton, there's just so many of them. There's so many of them, and it'll probably be some lad from Guyana who we've never heard of is going to come on and like score 60 yards, scream at goal from within his own half. So who knows?
Well, you mentioned the expected players there. João Pedro is one who was back as well, and looks like is in a good form as well. Welbeck is Brighton's highest goal scorer in the Premier League this season, 6 goals. There's Pedro with 4, and of course Mitoma with 3 goals. Brighton, by the way, haven't lost to Palace in the Premier League since 2021. The 22nd of February 2021 was their last loss. Incidentally, that was at the Amex. They lost 2-1 to Palace. So hopefully more of that on Sunday. The last result have been 1-1 at Celos, 1-1 at the Amex, 1-1 at Celos, 1-0 at Amex, 1-1 at Celos, and then the 4-1 victory at the Amex on the 3rd of February of this year. So it hasn't been, a lot of victories, between both sides, but maybe Palace will be able to replicate the 22nd February 2021 2-1 victory at the Amex. We'll see on Sunday. But just before we wrap things up, Brighton are also unbeaten at home so far this season. And there's just 2 other teams that are unbeaten at home in the Premier League. Who are they, Joe? That's your question.
It's a great question, Wally. I feel like one of them is going to be weird. I'm going to say, I know Liverpool only lost once.
Yeah, lost Nottingham Forest, yeah.
Forest, yeah.
And that was
I can't remember it was home or away, but I'm going to say...
that was at Anfield, so Liverpool's out, yeah.
Was it? Okay, well, Liverpool's not my guess then. Scratch that. I don't know why my head's gone here as a rogue shout. I don't remember Fulham losing any at home. Fulham one of them?
Yeah, no, not Fulham.
Chelsea?
Brentford, surprisingly.
Oh, of course. Yeah, of course.
They've had a great start, especially at home.
Almost all their points have come at home.
Yeah. Brentford. And,
I should have got that.
The other one is Arsenal.
Really?
Yeah.
Arsenal lost so many games.
I was more surprised at the Arsenal part than Brentford. I thought Arsenal lost to Bournemouth at home. Then I remembered, that might have been City, yeah. So yeah. Anyway, so it's Arsenal, Brighton, Brentford. Those are the three teams yet to lose a game at home this season. But I really, really hope, Brighton will be losing their first home game on Sunday. Anyway, that's as much as we'll take tonight. Thank you very much, Joel, for your thoughts on the pod tonight. Thank you really for being a part of it, okay?
Thank you for having me, Wally.
All right. Many thanks to you at home as well for joining the pod. Remember, feel free to let us know what you think about our content, what you think we should be improving upon. Feel free to give us 5-star rating if you so wish at GSPN Palace. That's where you can link up with us across all social media platforms at official GSPN official. That's how you get to talk with the brother network of podcasts, and we'll be glad to hear from you. From me and Joe tonight, we say enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.